This is what she said. Word for word, standing on her own front porch, in front of a yard full of guests and a neighbor who had not been invited. Someone needs to do something about these people. They've turned this whole block into a circus. Patricia Weston said it loud. She said it the way people say things when they want everyone to hear and no one to respond. Her arms were folded across her chest. Her gaze swept across the white folding chairs, the string lights woven through the oak branches, the round tables dressed in ivory linen, the guests in their Sunday finest moving slowly across the backyard of the house at 412 Oleander Drive. She spat toward the hedgerow. Filthy. Absolutely filthy. Good families live on this street. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. But what Patricia Weston did not know, what none of this mattered against, was that the bride standing upstairs in front of a mirror in that house had spent the last 19 years deciding the fate of people, far more powerful than a neighborhood cop. Before we get to what happened next, go back with me. Back 4 hours, to when this day was still everything it was supposed to be. The house at 412 Oleander Drive sat at the end of a quiet, tree-lined block in the Woodland Heights district of Charlotte, North Carolina. Magnolias older than anyone could remember shaded the front walk. The house itself was a 2-story colonial, deep red brick, black shutters, a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The kind of porch built for long summers and longer conversations. Franklin Mercer had bought this house in 1959. He paid for it with 28 years of work, driving a city bus through the streets of Charlotte, saving in an account his wife kept hidden in the back of a kitchen drawer. When he signed the deed, there had been 4 black homeowners on the entire block. Now, 65 years later, his grandson Raymond Mercer was the only one left. The neighborhood had changed around them. Wealthier faces, newer cars, larger renovations. But the house on Oleander Drive stayed Mercer, and today, it was dressed for a wedding. Pay attention to the white gardenia pinned to Raymond Mercer's lapel. It will matter later. 47 guests had gathered in the backyard. Family from Columbia, South Carolina. Friends from Washington. Colleagues from across the state. They moved between the tables in their church hats and tailored blazers, greeting each other with the warmth of people who had not all been in the same place in far too long. A jazz trio played beneath a white canopy near the back fence, a slow, easy melody that mixed with the scent of wisteria and grilled shrimp drifting from the catering station. Upstairs, in the bedroom where she had grown up, Diane Mercer stood in front of the mirror and did not move. The dress was ivory silk, simple, sleeveless, with a long satin train that pooled behind her on the hardwood floor. Her hair was pinned up with a single pearl clip that had belonged to her grandmother. She wasn't adjusting anything. She wasn't checking anything. She was standing very still, looking at a framed photograph on the dresser. Her mother. Gone 9 years now, she picked up the frame, held it against her chest, closed her eyes for exactly 8 seconds. She did not cry, she just breathed. A knock at the door. Raymond stepped in. He was 72 years old, dark suit, silver tie, white gardenia on his lapel. He took one look at his daughter in that dress and stopped where he stood. His lower lip pressed tight. He blinked 3 times, fast, trying to stop something that was going to happen anyway. "You look just like her, baby." His voice was low and rough. "You look just like she did." Diane smiled. She set the photograph back carefully beside the one object she had placed on the nightstand herself. A thick manila folder, bound with a rubber band, stuffed with legal papers, and a schedule marked in green ink. Even today, even now. She had closed it this morning, set it face down, and had not touched it since. Today she was not a judge. Today she was a daughter. A bride. She took her father's arm. "Let's go, Daddy." Downstairs, Marcus Webb waited near the arch. He wore his Air Force dress uniform, silver oak leaves on his shoulders, service ribbons pinned precisely, shoes that caught the afternoon light like mirrors. 20 years of service, a retired lieutenant colonel, who now directed a non-profit building affordable housing for veterans in the Charlotte area. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes forward, as still and straight as someone had drawn him. But when the back door opened and he saw Diane step onto the porch, something shifted in his jaw, and his eyes went bright and wet. The jazz trio began to play. Guests rose. Raymond walked his daughter down the center aisle between the white chairs, one slow step at a time. Afternoon light came through the magnolia branches in long, slow columns. The scent of wisteria and warm grass moved on the breeze. A little girl in a yellow dress scattered white petals from a small wicker basket, walking too fast, scattering them too eagerly, laughing at her own job. It was perfect. For exactly 6 minutes and 14 seconds, everything in that backyard was exactly what it was supposed to be. Next door, behind a thin lace curtain on the second floor, Patricia Weston watched. She had lived at 410 Oleander Drive for 11 years. In that time, she had filed 31 complaints with the Woodland Heights HOA. 19 of them had been filed against the Mercer family, noise vehicles, hedges, guests. The HOA had upheld 0 of them, not a single one. But Patricia did not file complaints because she expected results. She filed them because it was the most sustained form of pressure she could legally apply. Today she wasn't filing anything. Today she had called the police. The ceremony was 2 minutes in. Diane stood facing Marcus beneath an arch of white gardenias and pale green ivy. The officiant, a soft-spoken pastor who had baptized Diane as an infant, smiled at the couple and opened his Bible. Diane took Marcus's hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from nerves but from the fullness of it. 9 years without her mother. 20 years of Marcus's military service, moving him across the world and back. And now finally this, Marcus. From the day I first met you, that's when the sirens cut in. Low at first. Distant, somewhere beyond the magnolias. Then closer. Then unmistakable. Blue and white lights strobed through the gaps in the fence, crossing the tablecloths, the glass lanterns, the faces of 47 people who had come to witness something sacred. Not this. 2 police cruisers pulled to the curb in front of 12 Oleander Drive. Tires crackled on the dry pavement. Engines went quiet. Doors swung open with the heavy mechanical sound that changes the air in any yard, any room, any life. The jazz trio stopped mid-note. The pastor stood frozen, Bible still open. Diane's fingers tightened around Marcus's hands. Her veil caught a small gust of October wind and swept sideways. Every guest turned toward the street. Officer Dale Briggs stepped out of the first cruiser. He was in his mid-30s, close-cropped hair, sunglasses pushed up on his forehead. His jaw was set the way men set their jaws when they have already decided what they are looking at before they have looked at it. His right hand rested on his belt, not gripping, just resting the way a threat rests. Quiet and available, his partner, Officer Sandra Reyes, stepped out of the second car. She moved slower, her eyes moved across the yard differently. The flowers, the chairs, the guests in their church suits and silk dresses, the children sitting wide-eyed beside their grandparents. Her brow folded once briefly, then smoothed. Something about this did not match what she had heard on the radio, not even close. But Briggs was already moving toward the gate. We received a complaint about a disturbance and potential trespassing. His voice was louder than the yard required. Every syllable landed like a stone on still water. His eyes moved across the guests the way a man inventories something that belongs to him. Who's in charge here? Murmurs moved through the crowd. Raymond rose from his front row chair. Slowly, he smoothed his jacket. He touched the white gardenia on his lapel. He walked toward Briggs with the quiet, steady bearing of a man who has spent a lifetime being patient when patience cost him everything. I'm the homeowner, officer. This is my property. My family has owned it since 1959. My daughter is getting married today. That is what is happening here. He reached into his inside pocket and held out his driver's license with a steady hand. Steady eyes. Raymond Joseph Mercer, 412 Oleander Drive. Briggs glanced at the license for less than 2 seconds. Did not take it, did not read the name. His eyes were already moving past Raymond, scanning the guests, cataloging faces with slow, deliberate purpose. You got a city event permit for this gathering? Raymond blinked. A permit, assembly this size, 60-some people on a residential lot, that requires a city permit under Charlotte Ordinance. Officer, this is a private ceremony on private property. Charlotte Ordinance Section 1591 exempts private gatherings on residential land from assembly permit requirements. I confirmed this before we set up. I have lived at this address for, sir. Briggs raised one finger, a gesture small enough to be deniable and large enough to be understood by everyone watching. I didn't ask how long you've lived here. I asked whether you have a permit. Do you or don't you? Reyes stepped close and spoke low, near his shoulder. Dale, the code doesn't cover private events. This is a wedding. We document the call and clear out. Briggs did not turn toward her. I'll handle it. 3 words. Cold, final. The words of a man for whom facts have already become an inconvenience. Right on cue, the side gate opened. Patricia Weston walked across her lawn with the rigid purpose of a woman who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Arms folded, chin lifted, she positioned herself at the precise edge of the property line, not 1 inch on Mercer land, close enough that her voice landed on all of it. Thank God someone finally showed up. She said it brightly, theatrically, as though she were greeting a long-awaited friend. This has been going on since 9 this morning. The noise. The cars blocking the road. I've told them before, officer. They don't listen. They never do. Raymond kept his eyes on Briggs. He did not turn to face her. That woman has filed 31 complaints against my family in 11 years. 19 of them against this property. The HOA has upheld exactly none of them. Patricia's voice came back faster. Because no one takes it seriously. Look at this. Look at what they've done to this neighborhood. This isn't a private gathering. This is an invasion. Briggs held up a hand toward Raymond. Step back, sir. I need to speak with each party separately. I'm standing on my own land, officer, and I'm conducting an investigation. Step back now. The yard went still. Not a murmur. Not a whisper. 47 people frozen in white folding chairs, watching a 72-year-old man in a dark suit being instructed to move away from his own property at his own daughter's wedding by an officer who had not read his name, had not verified his address, had not cited a single ordinance that applied. That is when Marcus stepped down from the altar. He did not rush. He walked with the measured, unhurried pace of someone who has operated under pressure in conditions that made this look quiet. His Air Force dress uniform was crisp. Every ribbon aligned, silver oak leaves precisely placed, his posture carrying 20 years of learned discipline. He stopped in front of Briggs and extended his right hand. Officer, I'm Marcus Webb, United States Air Force, retired. I'm the groom. This is our ceremony on private residential property, with invited guests only. Can you specify which ordinance has been violated? Briggs looked at the extended hand. He did not take it. Sir, I'm going to ask you to step back and allow me to proceed. I'm asking a lawful question. What specific code section have we violated? I said step back, and I asked what law. 3 seconds passed. Nobody moved. The jazz trio sat motionless, bows in their laps. A child in the back row pressed his face against his mother's arm. The scent of wisteria still hung in the air, patient and indifferent, the world not caring at all what was happening beneath it. Reyes spoke again, quiet, almost pleading. Dale, noise complaint, private event, we document and we go. That's the procedure. Briggs did not acknowledge her. He turned away from Marcus and walked down the center aisle between the white chairs. Not around the chairs. Through them. Down the same aisle where a little girl had scattered white petals 12 minutes ago. His boots crushed 3 petals on the way through. All right, everyone needs to have identification ready. We're going to confirm that every individual on this property has a right to be here. From the second row, a woman in her 80s looked up at him. She wore a rose-pink hat with a small silk ribbon and had traveled from Spartanburg, South Carolina to be here. She was Marcus's great-aunt, 81 years old. ID? Honey, this is a wedding. I was sent an invitation. Ma'am, I need to see your identification. Her hands went to her purse. The clasp trembled under her fingers. A younger woman beside her leaned close, whispering, It's all right, Auntie. It's all right. It was not all right. But no one in those chairs had the power to make it so. Not yet. Briggs moved to the next row. A man in his early 60s, a retired school principal from Durham, sat beside his wife. Briggs pointed at him, UID. The man stared. Officer, I drove 3 hours to watch my cousin get married. You're asking me to show my license for sitting in a chair? Sir, I'm not going to repeat myself. The man reached slowly into his jacket pocket. His wife reached across and gripped his wrist. She held it there a moment, not to stop him, but because she needed something to hold. Her eyes carried something beneath the anger. Something older. Something inherited. Something that lives in the body of every black family that has ever been stopped, questioned, and told to justify its presence in a space it was invited to with love. 4 rows back, a young mother pulled her 6-year-old son onto her lap and covered his eyes with her palm. He squirmed. She held him tighter. Her lips moved without sound. Prayer or a promise or both. Briggs worked his way through the crowd methodically, deliberately, row by row. No please, no thank you, no explanation of any legal basis. Just a pointed finger and a demand repeated. He wrote nothing down. He cross-referenced nothing. There was no list. There was no protocol. There was just a man with a badge and a story he had already decided was true, asking black guests at a black family's wedding to prove they deserved to be seated in the chairs they were sitting in. Reyes stood at the edge of the yard, arms crossed, jaw tight. She watched her partner move through that crowd for 4 full minutes. The words were in her throat. She could feel them sitting there, physical, pressurized. She told herself she would speak if he went one step further. She told herself she would speak when he reached the front row. She didn't speak. Later, she would spend a long time thinking about that. Briggs returned to the front. He'd made his point to the guests. Now he wanted the house. "I'm going to need to conduct a walkthrough of the premises inside." Raymond stepped forward. "Absolutely not. Sir, I have reasonable grounds to. You have nothing." Raymond's voice did not rise. It deepened. The kind of depth that comes from a man who has had 7 decades of practice saying hard things calmly, because losing his composure was never an option he could afford. "You have no warrant. You have no probable cause. You do not have my consent, and you are not entering this home." Briggs moved toward the back porch. Marcus moved faster. He didn't run. He crossed the yard in 8 measured strides and stood in the doorway of the back porch, feet shoulder-width apart, hands at his sides, chin level. He did not reach for anything. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood in the entrance the way a man stands in front of something sacred. Not with force, with presence. "You do not have a warrant. You do not have permission to enter this home. I am a retired officer of the United States Air Force, and I am telling you, clearly, directly, and for the record, you are not authorized to cross this threshold." Briggs stopped 2 feet from Marcus, close enough that the air between them carried weight. He looked at the silver oak leaves on Marcus's shoulders. He looked at the service ribbons on his chest. He did not register them as anything other than decoration on someone who was in his way. His right hand moved from his side to the grip of his service weapon. He did not draw it. He did not need to. The message did not require a trigger. Every person in that yard understood it. Every phone that was recording caught it. "Sir, if you do not step aside, I will place you under arrest for obstruction of justice and interference with a law enforcement officer. This is your only warning." Marcus did not blink, did not shift his weight, did not move a single inch. "Then I would suggest you prepare to explain to a federal judge why you drew your weapon on an unarmed man standing in the doorway of his own home on his wedding day." In the chairs behind them, a grandmother pressed both hands over her mouth. A man in the back row wiped his face with his sleeve and looked at the sky. The 6-year-old boy who'd been pulled onto his mother's lap stared at the hand on the weapon with wide, perfectly still eyes, learning something no child should ever learn at a wedding. At the fence, Patricia Weston watched all of it. She did not look uncertain. She did not look troubled. Her arms were still folded. Her chin was still up. She caught Briggs' eye and gave a small, deliberate nod. The nod of a woman watching a plan execute itself. Diane Mercer saw it. She saw every part of it. The nod, the posture, the satisfaction. She set down her bouquet on the altar table. The white gardenias released their scent as they settled. She walked toward Briggs and stopped 6 feet away. Her satin train dragged across the grass. Veil moved slightly in the October wind. Her voice was calm. Not performance calm, calibrated calm. Every word chosen the way a surgeon chooses before making a cut. "Officer, you responded to a neighbor's noise complaint regarding a private event on private residential property. You have identified no probable cause. You have produced no warrant. You have unlawfully detained guests and demanded identification without any applicable legal basis. You are now attempting to enter a private dwelling in direct violation of the 4th Amendment of the United States Constitution. I am formally advising you to stop." Briggs turned to look at her. He looked at the woman in the ivory wedding dress. He looked at her the way men look at things they have already decided not to listen to. He almost smiled. "Ma'am, I don't need legal advice from someone in a bridal gown. Step back or you'll be spending your wedding night explaining yourself to a judge." From the fence, Patricia's voice carried in. "This, exactly this, you see? No respect, none, for the law, for the neighborhood, for anything. I've been saying this for years." Briggs turned back to Marcus. "Hands behind your back. What is the charge?" "Obstruction. Interference with a lawful investigation." Hands now. The yard held its breath. Every guest, every caterer, every musician with a bow still in their hand. Marcus looked past Briggs, past the badge, past the hand that had touched a weapon. He found Diane's eyes across the yard. She looked back at him. In that look was everything. Every deployment, every airport goodbye. Every phone call with bad reception at 2 in the morning. Every sacrifice made in separate time zones. And underneath all of it, quiet and steady and unshakable. One thing that did not need to be said. I trust you. Hold. Marcus turned around. He placed his hands behind his back. He did it with the precision and stillness of a man who has followed orders his entire life, including the unjust ones, because he understood something that Briggs would spend the rest of his career trying to understand. Compliance is not defeat. Dignity cannot be removed by metal. The handcuffs clicked shut. A retired Air Force lieutenant colonel in full dress uniform, silver oak leaves, service ribbons, 20 years of honorable service visible on his chest, was handcuffed on the lawn of his own wedding by an officer who had never asked his name. The 81-year-old great-aunt in the rose-pink hat pressed her Bible to her chest and looked up at the magnolia branches like she was asking someone above them to be watching. A grown man in the back row turned away and could not turn back. The 6-year-old boy stared at the cuffs with the open, unguarded expression of a child who is understanding something for the first time and will never ununderstand it. Reyes moved. She took 2 steps toward Briggs, voice dropping low. Dale, call it in before you put him in that car. You need to call it in. I've got it. He gripped Marcus's arm and walked him toward the cruiser. Diane watched her fiancé being walked away from their altar in handcuffs. Her face did not collapse. Her shoulders did not drop. She stood like something that had been standing a very long time and knew how to keep standing. But behind her eyes, something shifted. Something that had been present once before, every day for 19 years, the thing that entered the room when she put on her robe and took the bench. The bride had stepped to the side. The judge had taken her place. 2 rows back, a young man named Calvin Mercer, Diane's cousin, lowered his phone just enough to lean forward. I've got it all, Diane. He kept his voice barely above breath. Every second, she did not turn around. Her voice came quiet and level. Good, don't stop recording. Briggs had one hand on Marcus's arm and one hand reaching for the car door when Diane moved. She walked to the altar table. She opened her small satin clutch and removed her phone. She dialed. The Honorable Thomas Ashworth, Chief Judge of the United States District Court, Western District of North Carolina, her mentor, the man who had placed his hand over hers the morning she took the oath. He picked up on the second ring. Thomas, it's Diane. I'm at my father's home in Charlotte. An officer has handcuffed my fiancée at our wedding. No warrant, no probable cause. Unlawful ID demands, attempted warrantless entry of a private residence. He is walking Marcus to a squad car right now. I need Chief Holloway notified immediately. She ended the call. She placed the phone back in the clutch. She stood where she was and did not move. The October sun caught the silk of her dress. Her veil drifted. She looked like something carved from a very long patience. Anyone who had ever stood in her courtroom would have recognized that stillness without needing to be told what it was. Not peace, not fear. The specific quiet that arrives before a ruling that cannot be appealed. 43 seconds passed. Briggs had Marcus at the door of the cruiser. His hand was on the handle. His radio crackled. A burst of static that split the warm afternoon air like a crack in glass. Unit 7, dispatch advising. You are on scene at 412 Oleander Drive, residence of Raymond Mercer. The occupant's daughter is Judge Diane Mercer, United States District Court, Western District of North Carolina. Chief Holloway is en route. You are ordered to stand down. Confirm. Everyone in that yard heard every word. Briggs's hand did not move from the door handle. 12 seconds passed, then 13, then 14. 14 seconds for a man to stand at the edge of what he had done and calculate whether there was any version of this where he was not standing there. There was not. He turned around. He looked at Diane Mercer for the first time, not past her, not through her, at her. The woman he had told to step back. The woman he had threatened with handcuffs. The woman in the ivory wedding dress whose entire career had been built on the same laws he had just dismantled, piece by piece, in front of 47 witnesses and at least 2 cameras. Diane did not take a step toward him. She did not raise her voice. She offered him 6 words in the tone of someone reading from a record that was already closed. I advised you to reconsider. Reyes was already at Marcus. Her hands were shaking as she worked the key. First try, missed. Second try. The cuffs released. "Sir, I am so sorry. This should not have." Marcus rubbed his wrists. The skin was reddened where the metal had pressed. He looked at Reyes. A look that said he understood the difference between the person who did the thing and the person who let it happen, and that he understood Reyes was the second one, and that the second one does not get absolution just because they had the courage to apologize afterward. He nodded. "Once, that was all." 8 minutes later, a dark blue sedan pulled to the curb. No lights, no sirens. A quiet arrival that landed heavier than any siren. Chief Leonard Holloway stepped out in civilian clothes. Navy slacks, gray pullover, reading glasses on a lanyard around his neck. Off duty, a Saturday. He had come personally because he was not willing to let a deputy handle what he already understood this was. He took it in as he walked through the gate. The disrupted ceremony. The toppled flower arrangement where Briggs had stepped too close to a table. The catering staff standing motionless by the shrimp station. The guests in their best clothes, sitting silent in white folding chairs. The 81-year-old woman in the rose-pink hat, whose hands were still shaking in her lap. The groom in dress blues rubbing red marks on both wrists. The bride, a sitting federal judge, standing in her wedding dress beside a police cruiser on her father's lawn. Holloway walked to Diane first. "Your Honor," he said it the way the title is supposed to be said. "I am profoundly sorry. This should not have happened." Diane took his hand. One firm handshake. No warmth offered and none expected. She was not there to make him comfortable. Holloway turned to Briggs. The young officer was standing by his cruiser with the specific stillness of a man who has not yet decided which direction to run. His mouth opened. The beginning of a sentence that started with "I didn't know." Holloway looked at him and the sentence ended. "Officer Briggs. Badge and firearm. Immediately." Briggs's hands moved slowly, the way hands move when the body has not yet accepted what the mind already knows. The badge came off first. It made a small, flat sound landing in Holloway's palm. The weapon followed. Briggs stood in his uniform without either of them, and looked smaller than he had all afternoon. Holloway turned toward the fence. Patricia Weston was still there. But something had gone out of her posture. Her arms had dropped. Her chin had come down. The color had left her face in a way that suggested it might not come back. "Ma'am. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense under North Carolina General Statute 14-225. You have also filed 31 HOA complaints in 11 years, 19 of them against this household, and not one has been upheld. Investigators will want to speak with you. I would recommend you contact an attorney before that conversation happens," she stammered. "I had every right. This is my neighborhood. I just wanted, ma'am." Holloway raised one hand. "Go inside." Patricia Weston turned and walked back across her lawn. The door of 410 Oleander Drive closed behind her. Not a slam, just the sound of something ending. In the yard, 47 guests sat in the silence that follows correction. The silence when the world tilts back towards something that resembles justice, and people who have been holding their breath don't know yet if it is safe to release it. Briggs stood beside the empty cruiser, stripped of everything that had made him an authority 40 minutes ago, hands that would not stop moving even when there was nothing left for them to do. He took 3 steps toward Marcus. His voice came thin. "Sir, if I had known who you were, I never would have." Diane stepped between them. Her voice was quiet and did not waver. "You didn't need to know who he was. The Constitution you swore to uphold applies to every person in this yard, regardless of their title, their rank, their income, or the length of time their family has owned this land. You were not wrong because of who we are. You were wrong because of what you did, and you knew it was wrong before you did it. That's what makes it what it is." Briggs stood with his mouth open. Nothing came out. 2 more officers arrived and escorted him to the second cruiser. He got in. The door shut with the hollow sound of a door shutting on something that cannot be taken back. Reyes gave her full voluntary statement to the shift sergeant before the sergeant asked. "I observed the escalation. I verbally objected twice. I did not physically intervene, and I should have. I want that on the record." She surrendered her body camera footage without being requested. The sergeant noted her as fully cooperative and placed her on administrative leave pending review. In the yard, Raymond Mercer stood up, one hand on the back of his chair, the other smoothing his jacket. He touched the white gardenia on his lapel. Still in place, He walked to the front and faced the people who had come from 4 states and 9 cities to be here today. He said, "We have waited too long and come too far to let anyone take this day from us. My daughter is getting married right here, on this land, where her grandfather stood, where I stood, where she has every right to stand." Silence. Then Marcus's great-aunt in the rose-pink hat, the 81-year-old woman who had been asked for identification while seated in a folding chair at a family wedding, began to clap. Slow at first. Then the row behind her joined, then the next, then all of them, every person in those chairs, every caterer and musician and child, the clapping filling the backyard and rising into the magnolias until the trees seemed to hold it. The jazz trio picked up their instruments. The melody started again, carrying something heavier than before, something that had been paid for. The pastor returned beneath the arch. He opened his Bible to the same page it had been opened to when the sirens came. He looked at Diane and Marcus with eyes that were not dry and would not be. "Shall we?" Diane laughed, the first time in more than an hour. The sound broke through the tension the way light breaks through, not by pushing, just by being what it is. They stood at the altar. Marcus took her hands. His wrists bore 2 faint red circles above his cuffs. Diane looked at them. She looked up at him. Marcus spoke his vows. His voice cracked twice. "I have served in conditions that tested everything I had, and I have never seen anything as strong as what I watched you do today. You stood in a yard full of fear, and you did not lose a single inch of yourself. You were more powerful than anything in that yard, and you never raised your voice once. I want to stand beside that for the rest of my life. I will be proud to." Diane spoke her own vows. The same ones she had begun an hour ago, interrupted on the second sentence. This time there were no sirens, no boots on the grass, no radio static. Only her voice, his hands, and the October sun coming through the magnolias in long, patient columns. She finished every word. The pastor pronounced them married. Marcus kissed his bride. 47 guests erupted. Cheers, tears. The kind of applause that shakes leaves. The 6-year-old boy who had watched the handcuffs with wide, unblinking eyes was now in the center of the aisle throwing white petals straight up with both hands, laughing at the way they fell on him. Next door, behind the lace curtain, Patricia Weston watched the celebration she had tried to end. She was no longer standing the way she had been standing all day. Her phone was in her hand. Her attorney's number was already on the screen. She did not feel righteous anymore. She felt something she had not felt in 11 years of complaints and campaigns and calls to the HOA. She felt the specific, cold discomfort of being entirely wrong. Calvin's video was posted that evening. Unedited, 11 minutes and 40 seconds. A handcuffed Air Force lieutenant colonel in full dress uniform, standing beside a police cruiser while a bride in ivory silk stood 6 feet away watching. By 10 that night, the video had been seen by 4 million people. By Sunday morning, it was on every major news network in the country. By Sunday afternoon, it was being discussed in congressional offices and law schools in 17 states. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department opened an internal investigation Monday morning. By Wednesday, the FBI field office in Charlotte had initiated a federal civil rights inquiry under Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Investigators pulled Briggs's body camera, which had not been activated. They pulled the dash cam from his cruiser, which had captured audio of the full encounter. Reyes's body camera, which she had surrendered immediately, provided the clearest and most legally damaging documentation of all. They also pulled Briggs' service record. 11 complaints in 3 years. 8 from black residents. 2 excessive force allegations. 3 unlawful detention reports. Each one had been reviewed and closed with insufficient evidence. Each one was now reopened. The grand jury convened within a month. The indictments came. Against Officer Dale Briggs, unlawful arrest, civil rights violations under Section 242, unlawful search and attempted warrantless entry. 4 counts of misconduct under color of law. His law enforcement certification was revoked by the North Carolina Criminal Justice Education and Training Standards Commission before the trial date was set. He would not wear a badge again. Against Patricia Weston, criminal filing of a false police report under North Carolina General Statute 14225. Investigators documented her pattern. 31 HOA complaints in 11 years. 19 against the Mercer property. 0 upheld. Prosecutors added a charge enhancement based on demonstrated racial motivation. The Mercer family filed a separate civil suits for harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with a private event. Calvin represented the family in the civil matter. He had, it turned out, been preparing for a version of this case for 6 years. Briggs's trial was held in federal court in Raleigh. Diane recused herself completely. She made no calls. She pulled no strings. She did not need to. The evidence spoke in a register no defense attorney could match. The trial lasted 8 days. Reyes testified on day 2. She was clear and she was complete. She told the jury everything she had seen and everything she had failed to do about what she had seen. When the defense asked if she believed Briggs had acted with racial bias, she paused for 7 seconds. Yes. And I should have stopped him. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Guilty. All counts. The federal judge presiding over sentencing looked at Briggs for a long time before she spoke. She called what happened in that yard a fundamental betrayal of public trust. She said a badge is an instrument of protection, not a weapon of humiliation. She said that the man handcuffed in his wedding clothes had served his country with more integrity than the man who put those cuffs on him. 4 years, federal facility. Briggs showed no expression. He was led out in handcuffs, the same type he had placed on Marcus's wrists 10 weeks earlier. Patricia Weston's attorney advised a plea. The pattern of 31 baseless complaints made trial inadvisable. She pleaded no contest, 12 months probation. 200 hours of community service specifically assigned to the Charlotte Civil Rights History Center, where she would spend her weekends learning the history of the people she had spent 11 years trying to push off their street. A restraining order, 500 feet from the Mercer property. Full payment of the Mercer family's legal fees from the civil suit. She was also formally removed from the Woodland Heights HOA. The board voted unanimously 4 days after the video went public. Calvin's footage became a case study at the UNC School of Law. It was discussed in 3 separate law review articles within the year. Marcus's nonprofit received a wave of donations in the months following the wedding. He broke ground on a new veterans housing development in March. 54 units. Permanent supportive housing for veterans experiencing homelessness. The kind of housing that had not existed when he first came home from his second deployment and drove through neighborhoods in Charlotte watching men he had served besides sleeping outside. At the ribbon cutting, he wore his dress blues. A reporter asked if putting the uniform back on was difficult after everything. Marcus looked at the medals on his chest. He shook his head. These belong to me. That's not something anyone gets to change. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department announced a comprehensive reform package. Mandatory de-escalation training for all officers. A civilian review board with subpoena power. New protocols requiring supervisory approval before any escalation at a noise complaint call. An independent audit of every use of force complaint filed in the past 5 years. Briggs was listed in the training module under a section titled Failure of Judgment, a case study. His decisions were studied by every cadet in the academy, not to understand the man, to prevent the next one. Diane returned to her courtroom 6 weeks after the wedding. Same oak bench, same rigor, same careful, patient attention to every word given under oath. Attorneys who appeared before her noticed something in the weeks that followed, a particular quality to the way she listened when testimony involved traffic stops, noise complaints, officers who had failed to activate body cameras. She did not speak about the wedding from the bench. She did not need to. Every attorney in that building knew what had happened, and every one of them understood, without it ever being said aloud, that the woman behind that bench had not only studied the cases she was ruling on, she had lived inside one. 6 months after the wedding, the house at 412 Oleander Drive still stood at the end of Oleander Drive. Same red brick, same black shutters, same wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The magnolias were bare in the early winter light, the branches open and unhurried, reaching the same direction they had always reached. Raymond sat on the porch on a Saturday evening in late February. A cup of coffee steamed on the railing beside him. He was wearing a cardigan his mother had given him 30 years ago, soft and worn at the elbows. The chair beside him was empty, the chair where his wife had sat for 41 years before she died. He had never moved that chair. He had never sat in it. But tonight he looked at it, and something in his face was softer than it had been in a long time. On the mantelpiece inside the house, the wedding photo stood in a silver frame. Diane in ivory, Marcus in dress blues, 47 guests behind them, arms raised. Calvin had cropped the photo so that it included the magnolia branches overhead, heavy with leaves. In the bottom left corner, barely visible, a 6-year-old boy with both arms thrown wide, petals still suspended in the air around him. The best image of the day. The one that told the truth about what the day actually was. Through the window, Raymond could see it from where he sat. He looked at it for a while. Then he picked up his coffee, looked up at the sky through the bare magnolia branches, and let himself have this. Next door at 410 Oleander Drive, a for sale sign had been standing in the front yard for 6 weeks. Patricia Weston was moving. On the last day, neighbors watched from their driveways as she loaded boxes into a rented van. No one crossed the street. No one offered to help. No one lifted a hand to wave. The woman who had spent 11 years trying to determine who belonged on this street had her answer. The answer was not her. On the curb beside the van sat a thick manila folder, labeled in black marker, Hoa Oleander Drive, 31 complaints. 11 years of grievance and campaign, and accumulated certainty that she was the one who knew what this street should look like. All of it waiting for a Tuesday trash truck that would take it to exactly where it had always been going. Justice does not always come on time. Sometimes it does not come at all. But on one October afternoon in Charlotte, North Carolina, it arrived in an ivory wedding dress and a cathedral veil, and it did not need to raise its voice once. The Mercers did not need a title to deserve dignity, but it should never have taken one to receive it. That's what stays with you. Not the badge surrendered, not the cuffs removed, not the guilty verdict read aloud in a federal courtroom. Those are satisfying, and they should be. But underneath all of it, a question that does not have a comfortable answer. What happens to the family that does not have a federal judge at the altar? What happens when there is no call to make? No chief who drives over on a Saturday? No cousin standing in the third row with a phone? What happens then? That's not a story question. That's a real one. It belongs to all of us. So tell me this. If you had been sitting in one of those white chairs when the sirens came, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet? Would you have spoken? Would you have pressed record? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved something in you, if it made you angry or hopeful or both, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit like. Subscribe. Because stories like this don't just tell us what happened. They ask us who we are going to be.